Hello everybody, good evening, good evening. Welcome to you all for joining us this evening. We have a session led by Mrs. Hannah Cotton, who is our head of English. She'll be going through phonics and the phonics program Read Write Inc that we use here at Park House. By the end of the session, it should give you a bit more information about what we're doing to cover phonics within the school, but it also should give you some pointers, hints and tips for you to also support your children at home. At the end of the session, what we will do is we'll give you an opportunity for any questions and answers. So there is a function at the top of your screens where you can ask any questions, and then we will give you a little bit of a slot at the end there where we will answer those. So what I will do now is I will strategically hand over to Mrs. Cotton, and I will leave you guys to it, and I will come back for the quick Q&A at the very end. Okay, so see you soon.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Hilton. Good evening, everybody. So this evening, we're just going to have a little introduction to phonics. So alongside overseeing the English curriculum at Park House, a big part of my job is supporting the teaching of phonics and the teaching of reading to the children. So we're going to just discuss the program that we're using at Park House, which is Read Write Inc Phonics, and just sort of, like Natasha, like Mrs. Hilton said, give you a few tips on how you can support your children at home. Right. Here we go. All right, so as I said, at Park House, we are using the Read Write Inc Phonics program. This is new to Park House this year, so we've previously been teaching phonics, so all the teachers are very experienced with phonics, but the program that we're using, Read Write Inc, is new to the school. And this phonics program is for children primarily in reception up to the end of year 2. If children don't quite meet the Key Stage 1 reading expectations, they will continue with their phonics as they go through year 3 and 4. And then also we have another program which we'll talk about a little bit later called Fresh Start, which is just to support any children in year 5 and 6 who are still learning to read. If anybody there tonight has any children who are in nursery, they'll begin with Read Write Inc Phonics in term 3. So I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about what they're doing now in terms of phonics prior to starting the Read Write Inc program. The children who are using the Read Write Inc program are taught in groups basically, and this is based on their stage of reading. So the teachers assess the children every half term, and then this just helps us to make sure that children are practicing reading at the right level. So they're sort of getting that tailored phonics learning that's really going to help them progress quite rapidly with their reading. So in nursery, children begin with phase 1, and that starts sort of from August and September. And this is to sort of prepare them for beginning what we call phase 2 phonics, which is where they start the Read Write Inc program. So really, it's all about helping children develop their speaking and listening skills, and really sort of lays those all-important foundations for phase 2. So the program phase 1 is to help children really tune into all the sounds around them and to begin developing skills such as oral blending and segmenting, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So phase 1 is divided into 7 aspects which focus on auditory discrimination, so that's helping children just distinguish between different types of sounds, auditory memory, so helping them remember those sounds, and then sequencing those sounds, which will help them when they come to learning to orally blend and segment. And also, very importantly, we want to develop their vocabulary and their language comprehension as well. So as I said, it's broken into 7 aspects, phase 1. So I'm not going to read those out, but you can see those there. You can see the first 3 is where we really focus on that sound discrimination. So for example, the first one, environmental sounds, children might be learning to distinguish between different animal sounds, different transport sounds, to really help them tune in and prepare them for when they go on to learn the letter sounds later on. And then we move on to other aspects such as rhythm and rhyme and alliteration. And that last one, aspect 7, the oral blending and segmenting, is really very important because that's what helps them as they enter phase 2. And if they've cracked that at phase 1, they really do start reading very rapidly towards the end of nursery or when they begin reception. So every day, the children have a daily phonics lesson, and that involves teaching of sounds or phonemes, you might have heard them being called. Also, they learn to read what we call in Read Write Inc green words. So these are words that are decodable using sounds, and children can what we call thread talk the sounds and begin to put those sounds together to build the words, basically. And once they're sort of really very secure with those two things, they then move on to the storybooks. And through these storybooks, they read them 3 times at school, and then they will start bringing some of these storybooks home. You'll notice we've got all these resources ready in school now, and the children will start bringing some of these home to practice with you on a regular basis. And you'll see as your children do move on to these storybooks, their fluency really increases, and their comprehension as well. The programme really builds in not just the ability to read, but helping children to understand what they read as well. And then alongside the stories that we read with the children, every day the children receive a story time from their teacher where they're being exposed to stories that they're not yet able to read themselves, which is really very important because that exposes them to lots of vocabulary that they're not perhaps going to hear every day. And that's sort of really going to help them as they move through school, and they're going to start, you know, becoming more competent writers and being able to recall that vocabulary that they've learned through those enjoyable story times with their teachers. Another really important part of the Read Write Inc programme is one-to-one tutoring. So the idea is that we want children to keep up. We don't want to have to play catch up. So what we do very carefully with the assessments that we do with the children, we are then able to identify children who are not perhaps reading at the expected level for that point of the year. So whether they're in reception, year 1 or year 2, we're then able to target those children for one-to-one tutoring. So on top of their daily phonics lesson, they're going to get an additional tutoring session either with their teacher or one of the teaching assistants at school, and that's just going to give them that little bit of extra practice every day just to make sure that they keep up and that we're not later playing catch up. So now we've sort of been using the programme since September. The teachers are really beginning to embed Read Write in Phonics into their practice and their daily classroom routines. We're going to sort of really focus on this one-to-one tutoring as we move through the school year. So those children that sort of are perhaps struggling a little bit with their reading should be able to very rapidly keep up and catch up with their peers. Now, if we've got any children, parents of children who are in year 5 or 6 who are still learning to read, we are using another sort of aspect of the Read Write Inc programme, which is called Fresh Start. So essentially they're still learning to read in the same way as the children in reception and Key Stage 1, but the resources that we're using are just much more age appropriate. So they're still learning the sounds, they're still learning to blend and segment, you know, to support them with their spelling in the same way. However, instead of reading the storybooks, they've just got this material that's a little bit more engaging for their age range. So we're going to talk a little bit now about what phonics is. So phonics is basically the teaching of phonemes, where we teach children sounds. All words are made up of individual sounds, and those sounds are then merged together to form words. So for example, in a word like mat, we've got the sounds at, mat, and the children put that together. And in a word like ship, we've got the sounds ship, ship. So children begin by learning these sounds and blending them together in order to form words. The graphemes is basically just another name for the letters that we use to represent those sounds. So that's how we see the spelling of those words on the page. So we begin by teaching children the sounds. We don't use the letter names to begin with, that comes a little bit later. And once children are very secure, they'll then be able to identify, sort of as they move through key stage 1, really, they'll be able to identify the letter name and the corresponding sound. So in English, it's probably one of the most complex languages, alphabetic codes in the world. So we have 44 different sounds that make up all the words in the English language, but we've got 26 letters in the alphabet. So these 27 letters that we see in the alphabet represent single sounds, but then sometimes when we have pairs of letters, or sometimes 3 letters together, they represent one sound also. So that's where we get the additional sounds from. So for example, if you were writing the word hi, it only contains 2 sounds, h and I, but it's got 4 letters, so H, I, G, H. So the I, G, H represents the I sound. So this is where it becomes quite complex, and obviously we've got a lot of children in the school who have English as a second language. So this can be a little bit more complex for those students, but the Read Write Ink programme really breaks it down for children, and I'll just go on to talk a little bit more now and you'll be able to see how it works. So children begin by learning the set 1 and set 2 sounds. So this is as soon as they start reception, they start with the set 1 sounds. So that set 1 takes us up to the vowels A, E, I, O, U. And as I said, children just begin by learning the sounds, not the letter names, to read the words. And then as they move through the programme, they start to learn the more complex sounds, so what we call the digraphs, or in Read Write Ink we call them special friends. So the children know when they see those 2 letters together that they represent one sound, or in some cases 3 letters together. Now, when we teach the children these sounds, we teach them what are called pure sounds. So this is how they pronounce the sound very clearly. So sometimes people will use, for the letter M, they might say M, or for the letter S, they might say S, but that's not the pure sound. So what we need to do is ensure that as parents and as teachers, we can support our children by helping them learn the pure sounds. So I've got a little video that will hopefully work. I did check this earlier, where there's a little girl who's going to pronounce all the sounds from set 1, and well, I will send this out afterwards, so it's something that you can practice with your children at home.
Mrs. Cotton, if you pause it for 1 second.
Is the sound not on?
Yeah, I'll tell you what you need to do. If you just shut it down, reshare it, but when you reshare it, there'll be a little thing that says share sound on your computer. It always happens. So you might need to reshare the presentation. Yeah. Hi guys, sorry about that. We'll wait till Mrs. Cotton gets back on. Obviously, we're going to have technical glitches sometimes. So sometimes if we haven't shared the sound on our computers, you kind of have to go through a couple of different phases. So if you just give us 1 minute while Mrs. Cotton is able to do that, and then we'll make sure that we get that up for you. I'm just going to get her back on the screen. Just give me 1 moment. Thank you for your patience.
All right. Is that there? Is that back, Mrs. Hilton?
Maybe let's have a go if you play it now.
Okay, let me just skip back to the relevant page. If it doesn't work, we can send it out after. It's not a problem. All right, let's try again.
These are the set 1 sounds. These are the stretchy sounds. Oh, mm, 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 mm. These are the bouncy sounds.
All right, there we go. So that was little Sylvie there. So she's there using the pure sounds, and the children at school, actually, they do brilliantly with this. And by teaching these pure sounds, instead, it's just going to make it easier for the children when they come to blending those sounds together. So instead of m, a, t, m, at, mat, it just makes it much easier for them. So we will send this out anyway, along with a few other links after this evening. And this is something you can watch the video with your child at home and just practice those sounds with them, or get your child to help teach you. And then when you're reading with your children, if they're struggling with any words, you can help them by using those pure sounds to break down and sound out a word when they're struggling. So once children have sort of learnt those set 1 and 2 sounds and they're reading a lot more confidently, they then move on to the set 3 speed sounds. So as you can see, this is the speed sound chart here. So these are all the sounds, and they're broken into groups. So you can see, for example, for the vowel sounds, where we've got AY and AE and AI, you've got 3 combinations of letters there that make the A sound, and it gets, you know, it does get quite complex. So children will sort of learn these more as they're in year 1, really. A few children in reception will begin learning some of these, but as they move through the programme, by the end of year 2, they'll be confidently reading all of these sounds. So alongside teaching the children the sounds, we teach them to blend the sounds to help support them read the words. So for example, here we've got the sounds sat to make the word sat, and the children learn to what we call Fred talk these words. So I will show you who Fred is now. So here's Fred. If you ask your children, I'm sure they will be able to tell you all about Fred. We start by playing lots of Fred Talk games at the beginning of the year in reception to support children with their oral blending and segmenting. So Fred can only speak in sounds, and the children have to say the word for him. So Fred helps the children to practice blending their sounds together because he needs them to say the word. And we play lots of fun games like Fred says, touch your head, touch your leg. So lots of enjoyable fun games to help children really practice that skill. And we also use what are called your Fred fingers. So if your children are doing any writing at home, you can support them by encouraging them to use their Fred fingers for spelling. So this is where they sound out the words to help them spell them a little more easily. It basically means they don't have to memorize list of spelling words. So you might find sometimes your children are writing at home and they might write a word such as because, and they might spell it B-E-E-C-O-S, which is obviously isn't the correct spelling, but it's what we call phonetically plausible. So as teachers, we can read that word and understand what the children were writing because they've used the sounds that they can hear. So earlier on in the programme, when children are doing writing, we quite happily accept those incorrect spellings because they're phonetically plausible. As the children learn to all the set 1 to set 3 sounds, we then support them in their spelling to select the correct sound, and we also teach them what are called common exception words, which I'll show you a little bit later, but they're basically just words that don't follow the rules, and the children have to learn to read and write those, read them by sight and write them from memory. So as they move on to the storybooks, what they'll be doing is they'll be reading one storybook 3 times at school and the 4th time at home. So the children read these in class 3 times with a partner. Now it's really important rereading the same book because it really helps the children become very confident in what they're reading. And each time they read, they build their fluency, their speed, their accuracy and their comprehension. And you know, we really want children to love reading, and the storybooks are very enjoyable. So the teachers do model sort of that love and passion for reading to really support the children to become passionate readers as well. And the rereads that we do in school do have a focus to it as well. They sort of we have very detailed lesson plans where the children discuss the stories as well as reading them as well. So the first read focuses on reading every word accurately. The second read is reading the story more quickly. And then the third read is for comprehension, so helping the children to understand what they've read. And then children will bring home the same book to read at home with you. And, you know, if they want to read that 2-3 times, all the better. And the stories that come home, you will notice that the children should be able to read quite competently. They shouldn't be too difficult, because if it's too difficult for them, they don't want to read it. So we want them to build their confidence, to read fluently and quickly. And then this is how we see very fast progress from the children as well. So in terms of supporting the children at home, as we already said, we can use our pure sounds instead of the letter names when we're reading with children. We can use the Fred talk to read the words, to break them down, and then to also spell them. And listening to your child read their storybook every day. So the children are going to be bringing home a few different reading books for the week. And it's really quite important that the children read those storybooks 2 or 3 times. Just like we said, for accuracy, fluency and comprehension, and reading to your children every single day. So not just them reading to you, but also you reading them storybooks that they're not able to read yet, to expose them to sort of different types of stories, different characters and different vocabulary that they wouldn't come across every day. So as I said, we want to listen to that same storybook again and again. And we can encourage them to use what we call special friends, Fred talk and read the word. So I'll show you that in a little bit more detail in a second. And also talk to your child about the story and encourage them to use a storyteller voice. So lots of expression, using different voices for the characters, that kind of thing. So when you're reading at home with the children, the read write ink books that they'll bring home will look a little bit like this. Black Hat Bob here, who's a pirate on his ship. And if your child gets stuck on a word, you can say to them special friends, and they'll say yes or no. And then they can sound out the word. So they might have a word like ship, ship, ship. And if your child is stuck, you can model that for them. That's fine. And then also when you're reading with them at home, you will come across what we call in Read Write Ink red words. So these are the tricky words that children can't sound out. That they sort of need to learn to read by sight. So when they bring those books home, the Read Write Ink ones, they should be familiar with those red words. And as you can see, they're actually coloured in red to remind the children that this is a word that they can't sound out. But if your child does get stuck, that's fine. You can just remind them of the word. So as we said, please read to your children every single day. Talk to them, ask them lots of questions, let them ask you questions and share your opinions with them about the story. And reading to them at home, there's just a few things here that I think are quite useful to remind ourselves about why we need to read to our children at home. So when you're reading to your children out loud, it helps them sustain their attention. It helps them notice and appreciate rhythm and rhyme. It helps build their imagination, you know, picturing the story in their minds from the words on the page. You know, it helps them understand irony and humour. Lots of very funny storybooks out there for children. Exposes them to lots of new words in different contexts, which is really going to support them as they move through the curriculum at Park House and they start doing a lot more writing as they get higher up in the school. They're going to be learning lots of new vocabulary, exposing to the things they're not going to see every day, talking about and thinking about different characters, following a plot with twists and turns, understanding suspense and making predictions. So when you're reading to your children at home, you can sort of stop and say, oh, what do you think is going to happen next, and encourage them to make predictions. And they're going to link sentences and ideas from one passage to the next. So what we're going to send out is some links after tonight there's lots of tutorials that you can watch. So a bit like the little video on how to say the sounds that we watched earlier. There's more detailed tutorials about phonics itself and how to support your children at home. So we can send out the links to those video tutorials for you to watch in your own time. And there's other online resources that you can access as well. So Ruth Miskin, the parents page. Ruth Miskin is the lady who designed the program Read Write Inc. And it's one of the approved programs in the UK from the Department of Education. So there's some useful information on her website. She's also got a Facebook group. And some of you will be familiar with Oxford Owl because we did use it a little bit during the last online learning that we did. There are some free ebooks. So if your children get through all those reading books that we've sent home already, you know, there are additional ebooks that they can read on Oxford Owl for free. And obviously we've got the Reading Eggs access as well. So there's more books on there that you can read with your children at home. And that's everything for this evening. So I'll hand back to Mrs. Hilton and she'll let me know if there's any questions.
Perfect. It's taking a while to send over there. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Mrs. Cotton. Really informative. I think, you know, super helpful, especially if you're unfamiliar with phonics. Like Mrs. Cotton said, obviously, that presentation, like we always do, will be on our website, usually by Sunday, by the time I've sent it through to our marketing team. But the links will go in our weekly notices tomorrow. So when you get the weekly notice tomorrow, I'll make sure that all of those links are there. So we do now have an opportunity for any questions and answers. So I'll kind of disappear off the screen. I'll just leave that presentation screen up. And then if you just type them into the question and answer box, and then either I'll answer them or I'll direct them to Mrs. Cotton. So please feel free now to just start putting any questions in there, please. Oh, that's lovely. Not a question, but just a comment and reflection. Mrs. Cotton, someone said, excellent presentation. Thank you for the parental support.
Oh, thank you very much. You're very welcome.
Okay, I'll give 2 more minutes. Maybe this presentation was just the most amazing thing. No one had many questions. Oh, actually, we do have a question here. Hang on a minute. Will they learn the long vowels from stories, not separately, as in the start of set 1? Does that mean? Okay. Will they learn long vowels from stories, not separately, like in the start of the set 1 sounds?
So when they start the set 1 sounds, there are some vowels in there, but they begin by learning just the sounds and to read what we call the green words, so the words that they can Fred talk. As they move into the storybooks, so for example, at this point in the year in reception, the expectation is that children should be just about to begin the storybooks. And as they move into the storybooks, they start getting introduced to the common exception words and, sort of words that have 3, 4 sounds to it. And then as they move through the storybooks, they become exposed to longer vowel sounds, consonant blends, and the digraphs and the trigraphs. So as they move through. So it's really more sort of key stage 1 that they start becoming exposed to all those more complex sounds. But having said that, we do have some children in reception who are exceeding those expectations. So we would never hold any of those children back. The great thing about the phonics program itself is that because we assess children very regularly and we teach them in the appropriate group, they will always be getting phonics at a level that is right for them. So they'll become very secure, confident, fluent readers, and we do see quite rapid progress. So it does depend on the individual child as to how quickly they move through the storybooks. But, I do know, for example, in year 2, we've got some children who are already don't need phonics anymore, and they're able to move through to focus on language and comprehension spelling. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yep, I think that was really clear. I've just had one parent not quite ask a question yet, so I'm just waiting. They might just be responding. So if anyone else does have any questions, if you pop them in there now. If not, like I've said, we will be sharing this on our website. So at the bottom, you'll always see the ParkHouseConnects links. All of the links that Mrs. Cotton has at the end of the presentation will be put into the weekly notices. And last, oh, actually, this is a question. She said, thank you for the presentation. Should I be correcting my child in year 2 when he's phonetically spelling incorrectly?
Yeah, I think in year 2, at this stage, we do expect children to be selecting the appropriate sound where possible. And, to be a lot more familiar with the common exception words. So words like I, he, she, said, because, words that they can't sound out. So I think for a child in year 2, yes, it is appropriate. I mean, obviously, I don't know the exact reading level of this particular child. So what you might want to do is get in touch with the teacher themselves, just to discuss their reading level in detail. But yeah, I think generally speaking, a child in year 2, it's sort of okay to begin correcting some of their spellings and on offering them, a choice of which sound do you think we need, and letting them have a go. And then you can say, actually, we need to use this sound, like, that's fine. But for our children in reception in particular, we just, at this stage, we really want to sort of encourage them to be loving reading, loving writing. So we're giving them lots of praise and lots of positive encouragement and accepting those phonetically plausible words.
Sorry, so there was a kind of more of an extension to that, which was more like, so when he's writing using phonetic knowledge, should I be correcting his spellings or just leaving him be?
I think, yeah, you can leave him be, because the teacher will still understand what it is that he's trying to write. But also at this stage, we do want to be supporting them to select the correct spelling where appropriate. So I would just sort of use your judgment, and, you know, if it is one of the common exception tricky words, you can support them to spell that correctly, because we do that in school, that's fine. But also, you know, phonetically plausible words are also okay.
Okay, then another one. My daughter doesn't seem to know how to read the words or recognise them in her reading book. She enjoys stories but runs away from the reading books themselves.
So it might be that she's perhaps getting a reading book that's perhaps a little bit too challenging for her, and that's what's putting her off. So it might be an idea for her to step back a little bit to a slightly lower reading band, or, I mean, depending on how old she is and what reading level she's at. You know, some of our younger children receive, to begin with, books that have no words, where they focus on the comprehension and the inference from the story. So in that instance, I would just have a chat with the class teacher, and just, you know, look at the reading level for that child and see if we can maybe get her a reading book that she feels a bit more confident with, because then she'll be able to feel more secure and progress more quickly. Okay,
perfect. Okay, that's, yeah, just there, because they said they felt that her child possibly feels a bit intimidated by the reading task. So again, just reiterating what Mrs. Cotton said there, you know, sometimes it's better to go backwards a little bit, build up their confidence, and then, you know, then to build it back up again. So I completely agree with that there. Is it okay for a Year 1 child to prefer to read silently than reading out loud?
If they're a very competent and fluent reader, yeah, that happens. Children are quite happy to read silently. But I would still try and encourage them to read out loud to you at least once a day. That's a skill that the children all through the school, even, you know, our children in Year 6 who are very competent readers, we're still encouraging them to read out loud, because that reading voice, reading out loud to others, is a skill in itself and is different to just sort of sitting and reading to yourself. So if they're just quietly reading a book in the corner, absolutely let them sit and read it silently, but try and spend some time where they do read out loud to you as well.
Okay, and then I also find myself correcting my child by going back and using Jolly Phonics method. As the school has switched over to read writing, should I stop doing this?
If they're sort of, say, for example, in Year 2 and they're very familiar, because all the children in Year 2 have started Read Write Inc, and that this is the first year for them, so they've had to change programs. It's not a bad thing necessarily, because it's still the same sounds that they're learning. It's just a slightly different method. So Jolly Phonics focuses more on actions and the songs, which some children really respond to very well. If they're sort of a reception child, I would try and support them with the Read Write Inc style. So we have something I didn't mention is when they're doing their handwriting, we have phrases that are specific to Read Write Inc when they're doing their writing, which I can also send out if people would like that. So it might cause a little bit of confusion for your child. So I would try where possible to look through some of the material that we send out and try and support them with the Read Write Inc. But it's not going to confuse them too much as long as we're still using those same pure sounds and the oral blending and segmenting.
Okay, perfect. And then any tips on helping my child with the fluency of their reading?
I think really that just comes down to regular practice as well. And as I said, if they are receiving a reading book that's appropriate to their level, you will naturally see that fluency improve because it's not too difficult for them. But yeah, it really does come down to regular reading every day, which they're doing in school anyway, but doing that at home as well is really going to boost them and really support them with that.
Should I explain every vocabulary found in the text of, in the book to the child once that he or she comes across, or should I leave it and explain the whole story and pictures to the child at the end?
If they're getting stuck on particular word, I mean, most, and they do this in my class when I'm reading the story, they'll stop me halfway through the story and ask me, what does that mean? So yeah, if they're asking you whilst you're reading together, then by all means explain that particular word in that moment. Is more likely to stick that way as well because it's in context, whereas if you wait till the end they might have forgotten that particular word. But then also at the end, when you've read the story, I think it's really nice to spend time asking them a few questions and just discussing the story. A lot of the reading books that we send home, the Oxford Reading Tree ones, they actually have questions in the back. So you can use those to support you if you're not sure what to ask your child when discussing the story. Have a little look in the back of the book, and I think pretty much all of them have questions in to support you. So a little bit of both really, in the moment, in the context of the story, and then also discuss it at the end as well.
Excellent. And then last one then, which is more of a comment rather than a question, which just is from a parent that says, I just want to thank you, Mrs. Cotton, for the clarification and effort that you are doing.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Like I said, it will be published by Sunday. All links, including the last one that Mrs. Cotton was talking about in terms of the phrases for helping with forming the letters, will also go out. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Have a lovely evening, and we will see you all tomorrow. Mrs. Cotton, thank you so much. Amazing as always.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.